The recent rains and severe flooding in many parts of the country, but particularly in KwaZulu-Natal and parts of Gauteng. A conversation is needed about the decaying infrastructure. I asked asked all of you a little earlier on to identify those areas that you avoid driving at night because of the poor road conditions. And I mentioned a stretch of road near where I live where there are 3 gaping holes that if I did not know were there could cause serious damage to any motorist or indeed even a pedestrian, particularly at night. Because, of course, what also compounds the problem is that often street lights aren't working. You see this even on a number of highways in Gauteng. So what is to be done about our decaying infrastructure? Have a listen to some of the examples you gave.
Morning, Mr. Bingwa. Sender from Joburg here. Reporting leaks. I reported a leak on a certain street in the CBD, corner Hook and Noord. I sent a tweet with a video of the water gushing. It wasn't a kilometer high, it was just about 5 centimeters high. And it was ignored. I sent a picture of the same spot, but on a different day, different week, different month. And it was ignored on Twitter. So, yeah, ignorance bliss.
Good morning, Bongani. No, they don't respond. There's a leak on New Road in Midrand that I've reported. I even reminded them. I reported it last year in November. And I think 2 weeks back, I reminded them, no, nothing is happening. That water has been leaking since last year.
The other question, of course, was, have you tried to notify the authorities? Has anything been done? How quickly do they respond? I've mentioned before on this program, I've tweeted, about several videos over a period of time of gushing leaks in my neighborhood or thereabouts. And very often, not much is done. So we've invited the Vice President of the South African Institution of Civil Engineering, Avi Menon, to join us to try and help us wade through some of this. A pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Bongani. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Listen, as somebody who may have seen some of what we have been talking about yourself, what are your observations, firstly as a citizen, but then as somebody who is an expert on engineering? What have you seen?
I agree with some of the views of the callers, and I think we have a huge problem in South Africa in terms of maintaining and our aging infrastructure. It's not just water leaks, but the potholes, and one of the you spoke about the street lights. So all that is a big problem, and it starts with our aging infrastructure. Our infrastructure was designed built a few decades ago, and since then the population has increased in most of our cities and towns, and it's not designed for the traffic or the number of people. So that's the second part of the problem, is the urbanization. And the third part of the problem is the poor maintenance. There's vegetation that's growing there's many roads where you see grass growing on the pavement itself.
Yeah.
And it's due to poor maintenance. There's debris on the road. There's plastic and paper and leaves. I don't know if you remember, I think it was last year or year before, somebody tweeted a picture of a person cleaning the street, and they were pushing the debris into the stormwater drain, which ends up blocking the drain and making the situation worse. And the issue of potholes, I don't think there's a street here in Joburg. I live in Joburg, and I don't think there's a street here without a pothole. There's potholes everywhere, especially with these rains lately.
Yeah, and even when there are efforts, I was going to come in and say, even when there are efforts to give us a sense that they're aware of these problems, there's been a cleanup campaign in the Johannesburg CBD, but it feels so cosmetic. I bet you, even from the pictures, they have tweeted themselves as the city. If you go back there, a week or two from now, it'll be exactly as it was before.
100%. I think it depends on the intensity of the problem. So if there are some problems, some potholes which can be fixed cosmetically, whereas in some cases where the base layers have started failing, which is the top layer is your asphalt or the blacktop that you see, the layers below are also designed to carry a specific amount of traffic and trucks. When those layers start failing, then if you do a cosmetic upgrade or just patch the pothole, it's not going to solve the problem. It will come back. So you have to go back and strip the entire road and the layers and redo, start with compaction, do the base layers, and then come back and do the top layer of asphalt. And that goes back to having the resources, financial resources in the municipality to be able to do that. And the example I give is, the maintaining your car. If you have a car and you're supposed to do periodic, in the case of a road, a periodic and routine maintenance. In the car's example, it's basically you're supposed to take it for service every 10,000 or 15,000 kilometers. And if you don't do it, what ends up happening is 5 years or 10 years down the line, you basically have to throw away your car and buy a new one because it's got to a point where you can't repair it anymore. You might as well buy a new. It's actually cheaper for you to buy a new one. And that's exactly what's happening with our infrastructure, that we're not doing sufficient maintenance on our infrastructure. And you get to a point where you have to completely rehab the whole thing.
And had you, of course, maintained it, the car might have lasted you longer. You've mentioned the issue of resources, and we'll come back to that perhaps in a moment. But how confident are you in terms of the competence, the will of those in charge, specifically around the urban planning? You've mentioned pressures of migration and population growth. We're often seeing buildings and complexes going up in various neighborhoods, and it doesn't always feel to me that when those are approved, we've taken into account what the infrastructure that's already existing, what it can handle.
There's quite a bit of a disparity between urban or metros and your towns and smaller municipalities. To a great extent, the cities or the metros have the technical know-how, but they don't have sufficient engineers and planners. So the people who are there, for the most part, I think they know what they're doing, at least in my opinion. But there's still, there's one engineer for 6 departments, or there's many vacancies which have not been filled for years. So that resource problem exists. In the smaller municipalities, I think the problem is much deeper, where they don't have a full understanding of how do you plan infrastructure, how do you, design it, how do you build it, how do you maintain it, what are the costs. They're supposed to have an asset management system which tells you how many kilometers of paved road, gravel road, when was which sign replaced, are there guardrails, are they in good condition? And most of these municipalities don't have it, and they've never even heard of it, and they don't even have it on an Excel. So that's a huge problem. Now, if you expect them to go and maintain all the kilometers of roads, they wouldn't know where to start. From a resource standpoint and also from a financial standpoint, they wouldn't know how to budget it and say, if there's 100 streets with potholes and you have 5 million rand, the question is, where would you start allocating that 5 million? So that's where the asset management system comes in, where you prioritize your projects and you say, this project needs to be done in this financial year. Next financial year, we're going to go to the next project and maintain it. And there has to be a whole budgeting for the next 5-10 years.
What can we do? I mean, we surely can't just, as residents, throw our hands in the air. And I know we get to vote, but what can be done? Is there a way to put heads together? Is there a way, for example, for engineers to come forward, to have conversations, whether at provincial level or at metro level, to talk with officials, to try and see if we can all reverse this slide?
So what we do as SAICE is, the first thing is to identify the problem and assess the gravity of the problem. So we produce a report card every couple of years called the SAICE infrastructure report card. And that's cross-cutting from roads to water to electricity and, public buildings. And literally like your school report card, it tells you, are you an A or an F in terms of water, in terms of roads, where do you score? And roads,
I dread to ask what we are
IT
overall.
It's not a pretty picture. It's becoming worse as as the years pass. So the point I was trying to make is that the first we need to identify and assess the problem, and the second part of it is, as SAICE, we meet with the ministers, we speak to the officials, we are an advocacy group where we are trying to make a change and create awareness about this problem. The second part of it is we develop technical guidelines, and we have a bookshop where we sell a lot of these technical manuals and books which are available. We also have training and capacity building webinars and courses where, and you don't have to be a member to attend those courses. If you're an architect or a town planner and you want to attend these courses, you're welcome to attend them. And the third part is we collaborate a lot with government to help capacitate them. And the last part is partnership with universities. We have student branches, and we have a lot of links with the most of the universities in South Africa, and to help develop new methods and new techniques. And so that's what we do as SAICE. But as a public, I think we have to continue to be vocal. Free speech is still with us. I think it's important that we continue to complain. Even though the pothole is not fixed after 3 years, I think we should complain about it.
So it isn't as if the help isn't available. Avi Menon, appreciate your time, the Vice President of the South African Institution of Civil Engineering.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.